like to thank you all for coming to our Yom HaShoah Gleneagles Hadassah Remembrance Ceremony. Before we get started, I'd like to ask every one of you to please mute your phones. Thank you, Donnie, very much. I'd like to have Phyllis Goldblatt come up here to talk about the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Wow, it's so nice that this meant so much to so many of you to come out tonight. We are gathered here tonight to memorialize the victims of the Holocaust on the 84th year since Kristallnacht, marking the beginning of the Holocaust. We say 6 million, but do we actually think about these lives lost, these families obliterated? 6 million names, 6 million faces, 6 million stories. We may carry their names, but we don't know their faces. We don't know their stories. They have all been lost. On this day of remembrance, we take time to try and feel the suffering, pain, and tears of so many. We solemnly remember the 6 million of our people brutally murdered for being born Jewish. Today, in 2022, we can sadly no longer depend on survivors to tell the stories of the Shoah. Their numbers are quickly diminishing. The responsibility for remembering the Holocaust and all of its related history falls upon all of us. Remember, Zohar. Tonight, we remember the victims of the greatest crime of mankind. We remember when hate took hold of humanity and turned hearts into stone. We remember when cries reached out for help, but the world was deaf. We know that while we do not have the ability to bring back their faces nor the stories of the victims, their past, our past, we must remember so all the suffering will not have been in vain. We all proclaim the mandate, never again, while anti-Semitism is thriving around the world and here in the United States. Just the other day, hateful anti-Semitic flyers were found distributed at more than 100 homes in Boca Raton. All of us are here today because we feel responsibility, compassion, and duty to pay homage to the 6 million. But have we instilled this responsibility to our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren? A quote by Elie Wiesel: "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." I would like to introduce Richard Cohen, who has won awards in teaching the Holocaust through the artwork of his students. Richard taught art for many years at the Philadelphia School for Performing Arts, where he won awards for a citywide Holocaust project. Some of his students have gone on to sell some of their work for many thousands of dollars. Some of the pieces of art have been donated to the Jewish Federation of Philadelphia, where they are on display. Following these remarkable slides, Don Hofrichter will lead us in Kaddish. 6 candles will be lit to commemorate the 6 million. Richard?
Good evening. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and please excuse my voice. Stop smoking. As Phyllis was kind enough to say, I taught for over 40 years at Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts. Was the last half of my career, 20 years. When I got to teaching high school, I was teaching commercial art, advertising design, and graphics, illustration. With that in mind, my entire, my entire curriculum was based on what you saw on the flyers that you found at your seats. My whole purpose with my students was to teach the whole child, not just about art, but about life and how to successfully make their journey into the adult world beyond the bubble of our studio. So it was all about giving back to the community, which provided an amazing place to go to school. The Jewish Federation of Philadelphia and the Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors sponsor a contest every year in the performing and visual arts, and it was dedicated in honor of and in commemoration of Mordechai and Aletich. How many people know that name? He was the young Mordechai and Aletich. He was the young leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I don't have many of these left, but here's a biography of his life and his time in Warsaw. I have a few that I can lend to you to read, and borrow. And another thing I used as reference work is the actual congressional record on what Eisenhower and the Allied troops found when they entered the camps. So, if you want to read this, it's very enlightening, unbelievable. As Eisenhower said when he opened the first camp, when he arrived at one of the first camps, he said to his other generals, "Get Congressman here, because somewhere down the line, some bastard is going to say it never happened." Very prolific. I asked my students if they ever heard of the word Holocaust. One or two, maybe, each year raised their hand. My student body was made up of little Irish kids from South Philadelphia, Italians, African Americans, lots of Asian kids. Very few, for whatever reason, very few Jewish students in the visual arts community. They were in either drama, theater arts, dance, or music, creative writing. But even so, the students responded to my asking them to watch a film called Genocide. This is how I introduced the Holocaust to them. This is an amazing film. It was produced by the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, and it's narrated by Elizabeth Taylor and Orson Welles. And it's not just about the camps. The film starts out in the little shtetls of Eastern Europe and the life of the Jewish populations there, all the way up from prior to 1933 through 1945. It's an amazing film. I have one copy. If you want sometime, we can arrange either a showing here, or if you have a DVR, I'd be happy to lend it to you. I used other videos. A great source, of course, is the National Holocaust Museum in Washington. You get amazing things online. I showed them this film, Genocide, and it was interesting to see the reactions of the students, especially the African American students. And they say, why am I sitting here watching this film? Until Jesse Owens was dissed by the mustached man when he won his track and field records and his gold medals. I also had 2 Jehovah's Witnesses in my class who are amazing kids. Now, I'm going to show you this slide in a minute, but I want to let you know that before the students could touch pencil to paper, I brought in survivors to speak to the kids, to talk about their own personal stories. Even as adults, we have trouble trying to figure out what 6 million meant, or 11 million, or 3 million children who perished. The stories were incredible, and the student reactions were absolutely amazing. I taught this subject in 11th and 12th grade. They were a combined studio class, and it's interesting, with all the other social issues on that sheet, when my 11th graders returned the following fall as 12th graders, I showed them, and we talked about various issues that they could work on. And every student, every year, who became a 12th grader that worked on a Holocaust piece the year before opted to do another one. Incredible. Some of these kids have gone on to do very well in the art world. I have one student, you can look this name up, Barnaby Furnass, Furnas, making 7 figures for his artwork. I have students that I worked with in the music department. One is now the music director of the Newport Jazz Festival, world-renowned jazz bassist. Another world-renowned keyboard player, jazz keyboard player, is now traveling around the globe playing, making people happy. He's gotten all kinds of awards as a new jazz player in that music form. If Scott can turn this on, I'm going to stop talking. I may interrupt a minute or so during the slide presentation, just to give you a little more background. But as you can see, if you looked at the alive work up here in the front, you can see, now these are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. Look at the talent, the empathy, the compassion. This was done. This was done by one of the Jehovah's Witness students of mine. This is part of it from Ness's Holocaust piece. Not everybody perished without a fight. These are ghetto fighters. In some of these drawings, you can see the ethnic background of some of the students. Most of us learn to draw as we are, whether we're Asian Americans, Filipinos. Saying goodbye to her shuttle before she went into the forest. This is part of a poem, the poem that Pastor Niemeyer wrote about not doing anything, and then when it came to him being arrested, there was no one left to save him. This was part of a statement by a Holocaust survivor who was hiding behind a wall, watching his parents and his neighbors being mass murdered. I'll never see another butterfly. This was interesting. He did a comic book style drawing with panels showing a successful escape. Showing some of the women who actually took it on their own to blow up the crematoria in one of the camps. This piece was done on 2 layers of illustration board. Figures in the foreground are away from the background. Sorry about the image, but this is a group of Jews captured inside a synagogue. Nightmares. This is interesting. The figures in color are the survivors, the ones in silhouette perished. Red. This is an interesting piece. The young man who did this was a Russian immigrant. He did this piece as an 11th grader, and then, as a senior, he took the same image and made it into a video, animated video. I want to thank everybody for paying attention. I want to say give a big hug and kiss and thank you to Phyllis and Cheryl and the entire HaDossah membership for inviting me to come here and show these pieces to you. Over 17 years that I taught this particular project, I probably, the students produced probably close to 900 pieces of work. And a lot of the kids left the original pieces for me because they knew I did a lot of lecturing around the state of Pennsylvania, colleges, universities, and charity organizations. Thank you again for all coming out. Oh, after Kaddish, if you want to stay and ask some questions, I'll be happy to remain here and answer them. Thank you.
It's just so awesome, I can't believe it. For our first candle, I'd like to call Andy Hamori. He was born and raised in Hungary. Most of his family perished in the Holocaust, but he and his father survived in a safe house established by Raoul Wallenberg. If you can remain standing after you light the candle. Gabe Varadi. He was born and raised in Hungary. He survived running and hiding from the Nazis as a child. Please come up and light the next candle. Thank you. Danka Blaszfield. Danka was born and raised in Poland. She is a child of a Holocaust survivor. More than 30 members of her family were murdered in the Holocaust. Thank you. Don Hofrichter, known at Gleneagles as our lay cantor, and leads us through song and prayer whenever necessary. Richard Cohen, who dedicated his life to his teaching career to teach us the Holocaust through art. Fred Singer, through his photography, has recorded many aspects of Jewish life, from recording stories of Holocaust survivors to photographing the history of Israel. I lit my own candle in the privacy of my home last night to memorialize my parents, both survivors, as well as so many of my family who perished. On a brighter note, let's wish a joyous Mazel Tov to Israel, soon to be celebrating her 74th year of independence. Peace be with her, HaShoah. I would like to thank Fred Singer for recording tonight's program, soon to be available on YouTube. If any of your friends were not able to attend tonight and wish to view it, please tell them to go to YouTube. Donnie? Before we rise for Kaddish, I would like to thank all of you for participating in tonight's program. It truly warms my heart to see how many of you care. Thank you.
All rise for Kaddish, please. And you'll join me in saying, Yiskadal v'yiskadash me'rabo, v'yolmod divrach yirasei v'yamlich machosei, v'chayechonu v'yamechonu v'chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gola v'izman kori v'yimeru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach v'yolam u'me'omayim. Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kurusha b'richu v'eila min kol b'chasa v'shirasa tush b'chasa v'nechemasa d'amiran v'yolma v'yimru Amen. Yehei shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mamav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, Yimru, Amen. Thank you. You can be seated, thank you.